And so welcome everybody to our Wednesday webinar. This week we have Ed Hill and his business partner, Chuck McKnight. They are with Synchronous Solutions. Ed, he worked as a research director at Clemson University. I don't know if we have any Tigers fans here, but he worked with at least one. And he, in that role as research director, he studied the theory of constraints, and he worked with Dr. Eli Goldratt. I don't know if how many of you have read The Goal, but that book goes in depth into the theory of constraints, and he worked on many projects to develop approach for American industry specifically. And so then for the past 25 years, although I'm sure between the two of you, I think there were maybe 85 years or something like that, working with small businesses in various industries using the principle of theory constraints. They have a specific methodology or system called synchronous flow, and they've been implementing that in the countertop industry for many years. So we're excited to have them, and we're excited for this conversation, which Ed will start for us. And I think they have expressed, and you can correct me, that we do want this to be a discussion. So if you have questions or thoughts or specific examples within your shops, you can definitely feel free to put that in the chat. And we will be sure to bring that up. So thank you, Ed. Thank you, Chuck, and we'll get started.
All right, thank you. Let me make sure we have the screen. Everybody can see that?
Yep.
Looks good.
Okay. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I'm speaking to you from Charleston, South Carolina. We are here with our granddaughter and her dogs that you just may have heard bark from the other room. So we'll have to deal with that. But we're going to talk about change today, and Grace asked me to go through some of the principles of synchronous flow, but I want to begin with a discussion about, what it takes to make improvement. How do we get this done? What steps do we take? And how do we make it sustainable so it's not just the flavor of the day approach, which might get you some results temporarily, but they don't last. Well, there are ways to make it last, and there are ways to get very, very good improvement, but there's some principles you have to follow to do so. So a few realities. You all know this, but the countertop industry is a very challenging business. Understatement of the day. Every job, every order is unique. You don't make widgets. Every single job that you do is different. We don't know of any other industry. I'm sure there are some, but we work with lots of other industries, but none like this one. None where literally every single job is a snowflake and different than every other. That makes it quite a challenge. Extreme variability in design, materials, labor content exist in your processes, the orders that you process through your business. And if you don't have a system to deal with that, then you're fighting fires all day, every day. Customers change their mind on a dime. We know that. They change often after template. And you can accommodate those changes to a point, but at a point, it becomes very problematic for you to make changes. So, again, we need a system to be able to deal with that and make it appropriate, make it easy for you to do business with, but at the same time, run your business in a way that makes you a profit. So add all to that, you have serious raw material problems, more today than any other time in my experience. The global supply chain is all messed up due to the pandemic, and that affected the availability of granite and even quartz from suppliers all over the world. Equipment problems. This is a wet processing business if you do hard surface, and it's that brings all sorts of problems. The automated equipment that is available to us today, excuse me a second, The automated equipment that's available to us today is very nice. It's wonderful, and it's a lot better than it used to be. But it's still, the machines don't run all day, every day, nor do people work all day, every day. People problems. All of that together means that this is such a challenging business. We must practice a system to deal with those realities. You can't wish those things away. You can't just say, you know, we got to work harder. There's a way to deal with that in a systematic approach, and that's what we want to talk about a little today. So you really are a manufacturer. We call ourselves fabricators, but the truth is you're a manufacturer, and manufacturers do three things. One, you produce a quality product. You must be virtually perfect. That's the way it is today. Any slight error and your customers are going to ask you to repair it or replace it. So quality is not really a competitive opportunity. It's not something you can say you're better than the other guy, because all of you need to be virtually perfect. You provide reasonable pricing. You should not be the cheapest. You are not a commodity. You're a custom manufacturer. You make unique products, and you don't want to be a commodity. So we don't encourage you to do so. Now, you still need to be competitive. You need to be in the ballpark, but there's not much of a competitive opportunity regarding pricing. Some, but not much. Where there is a competitive opportunity is in speed and reliability. When you are faster and more reliable than your competition, when you also produce a quality product and you have reasonable pricing, you're going to get the business. You're going to be first in line. And in order to do all those things, again, you must have a system in place that allows you to be consistent in that. You have other goals. You want to make a profit. We think a privately owned company ought to make at least 10% return on sales. 10% of your sales ought to be profit, at least. We have clients that are way better than that. And part of our goal in our work is to help people achieve a reasonable, in fact, a very attractive profit. You want to be able to grow your business intelligently. Now, look, currently most companies are experiencing what is often called a tsunami. Just business is coming at you from every angle. Business is strong. Most companies, I hope all of you, have plenty of market demand, but you can't do it all. You can't produce more than you are capable of producing. You have finite capacity, not infinite capacity. So growing intelligently is a big part of what you need a system in place to do so. You have to control the flow of information and material. You need both. You need the right information at the right time of the right quantity and quality, the same as material at the right time of the right quality and quantity in order to run your business effectively. And if you don't have both of those, you're in a bind and you're going to be jumping through hoops and putting out fires constantly. You need a system in place to accomplish that. Another goal of yours ought to be to provide a safe and pleasurable place to work and to minimize the chaos. You know, that's hard to do in the countertop industry. We've worked with 80-something clients over the years in this industry alone, and that's often what we hear first. People say, you know, this place is nuts. This place, the chaos is just out of control, and it's very difficult to maintain a personal life because we have so much stuff going on that we can't deal with it all at the same time. And when the owner, the manager, the boss takes all of that upon himself or herself, then you just made it worse because you're not counting on your should be strong support staff in order to help you get those things done. Say again, it's a challenging business, And it is somewhat unique in those regards. So there must be something in place. All right. An understatement also, improvement only occurs with change. You can't wish change. You can't wish improvement. You must change things. You must change your system in order to expect to see improvement in performance. Your existing system, as it exists today, will always give you the results you are currently getting. If you want better results, you got to change the system. That's such a fundamental truth, and it's something we run into all the time. People say, yeah, I want to improve, but I didn't mean me. I mean everybody else needs to improve. All my people need to do a better job. Well, look, it starts with you. Start with your system first. Procedures, policies, and the software system to support them, like Action Flow. It's all about the behavior of your system and the people within it. Don't start with new equipment. That's a knee jerk. I got to go buy a new CNC router or a new water jet cutter or a new install truck. Maybe not. Maybe your system isn't working as effectively as it should. We often hear people say, look, I just got to add more people. I've got to find more people that I can hire in order to meet the demand. Well, again, maybe not. Certainly as you grow, you will need more capacity, and oftentimes that means equipment and people, but you shouldn't start there. We got to get the most out of what you have first, and then worry about spending more money to add more capacity. Let's get the most out of what we have first. So resistance to change. Grace asked me about this. What is it that you all run into? She said that are the leading factors that people run into as obstacles to change. Well, there's an authoritative view on that. It's a book called Leading Change by Jim Cotter. Jim Cotter is a Harvard professor, and he ran a study for many years, and I think it continues, of companies who undertake improvement initiatives. And what he found is that the vast majority of improvement initiatives actually fail. And so he documented why they do. And here they are. He came up with 8 reasons. One is complacency, where people just say, well, this is just the way it is. That's the world we live in. We don't buy that. Weak guiding coalition. You as the owner cannot do it all. You cannot. And if you try to, you will fail. You got to call on your people. You got to give them both the authority and the responsibility to affect the changes that you need to improve your performance. Lack of vision. So you got to create a spot on the horizon out there. You got to let people know and get consensus among your people on what those things are that we seek. Where do we want to go? What is our destination? What do we want to achieve? Let's articulate exactly what our vision is for the future. And then you got a pretty good chance of meeting it. Without that, you got no chance of meeting it. Communicate that, share it with everybody. Your guiding coalition is that group of people that is your leadership team, your key managers and employees, but share it with everybody. Let everybody know where we're headed. This is why we're doing this, not just what we're going to do, but here's why we're doing it. And you can always make the point that, look, we're in business to make a profit, but we're also in business to provide all those other qualities of life that are important to all of our people in our community in which we live. You got to communicate that to everyone so we know what the objective is. So also, Jim Cotter found out that many companies engage in these improvement initiatives and they run into a roadblock and they say, oh, what the heck, looks like we're done. Well, you can't be defeated that way. You have to figure out a way to get beyond those obstacles, to overcome those things that affect your ability to reach your goals. And you can create short-term wins. So you put that spot on the horizon way out there. Well, people think, well, gosh, that's so far away. We're so far from that point. How could we ever get there? Well, create some interim points of success, some interim goals, so you can celebrate some short-term wins and motivate people, because they realize that we've gained some of it. We're on the way. We made some progress. Those are important things to do to avoid the whole initiative failing. And then the other side of that coin is declaring victory too soon. So we got almost there. Maybe we got halfway there, and we're busy on other things. So let's just say we've got it done and we're satisfied. Don't let that happen. We should seek the ultimate objective. Define the objective that's attainable. It may be a stretch, and it should be, but make it something that you're going to continue seeking, and don't give up too soon. And the big one is you have to establish a culture of change. You have to establish, and only you can do this, you have to let it be known that we are not going to tolerate where we are. We are going to continually improve, and continuous improvement means just that. We are never, ever satisfied. We're always looking for opportunities to continue to improve. And in order to do that, you have to have data that supports where you are now, so that you know what you need to improve next. And that's another place that Action Flow helps us, because they keep track of exactly where we are and allow us to identify opportunities for improvement. So our experience, so those were things that Dr. Jim Cotter came up with. Well, here's what we think. Chuck and I, the number one item is complacency. And this is what we hear. These are quotes that we often hear. People say, well, look, that's just the way it is around here. You can't change that. That's the way life is. That's the way the world is in our environment. People say, we've tried all that before. We did that before, and it didn't work. So we're not interested in trying it again. Again, you may have tried it before, but there are new ways of doing things. New science is created. New concepts are designed, and that should never be an excuse that you tried it before. We hear that a lot. We already do what you suggest. Well, you probably don't, but you may do some of it. You may touch on a few things, but you do that with the discipline and the determination and the science behind it that will get you to the result that you really seek. You probably don't do what you suggest, what we suggest, or you would already be there. You'd already be achieving the success that you want. So that's an excuse as well. We hear people say, why change? We've always done it this way. That's the world's worst reason for doing something, because you've always done it this way. There are always better ways to do things. I'm an industrial engineer, and over the years, I've had many cases where I think I've designed a workstation or a process, and, that's pretty good. That's about as good as it can be. Well, it's not. And having always done it this way is never a good reason for not changing to a new way. We hear people say, our people will resist any such changes. I would ask you, if you ever said that to me, I would say, well, who's the boss around here? Who owns this place? Who is the person who is responsible to maintain this business and to support your customers and to provide the opportunity for your employees as well as your company to grow? So people resist change. We all do that. That's a natural instinct. But it shouldn't be an excuse. It shouldn't be a reason that we don't entertain opportunities for improvement. big one we hear, we're as good as we can be. We've done it. We're just, we don't know of anybody that does it better than we do. Well, look around, because I'll guarantee you there are some people who do it better than you do. And by establishing a scientific way, a methodology that will allow you to identify the opportunities, the best opportunities for improvement, not the squeaky wheel, not what you think might be the thing you want to do next, but in fact, something supported by data that will help you to identify the things that will give you the biggest bang for the buck. Starts at the top, folks. Change and improvement starts with you. One of my favorite quotes: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. A fact of life.
Hey, yeah, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things about change like that is, for you owners, you built this business, and you've gotten it to this point, and you should be congratulated for that. What we're discussing here is not so much you've done it all wrong since then. No, you haven't. You've done a tremendous job that you should be celebrated to have the success you have at this point. But what got you here doesn't necessarily get you where you want to go. And I think that's an important point to be considering as you go through this. It's not a knock on what you've done. I mean, what you've done should be celebrated, but it certainly is not going to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chuck.
You bet.
Grace mentioned Dr. Ellie Goldratt. I had the opportunity to meet him, work with him for several years while I was at Clemson, and this is his approach, called the synchronous flow focusing steps. I want you to know this approach, what I'm about to show you, is the game plan for improving things. This is applicable to your business. It's also applicable to your personal life. You can apply it in your church group, in your civic group, in your kids' Boy Scout or your daughter's Girl Scout troop. It's applicable to anything you do. If you want to improve things, here's the way to do it. First, we call 3 necessary conditions. One is define the system. What it is that we want to improve. Let's put a boundary around what we're talking about doing. Let's define the system. In an operation, a business operation, we talk about the manufacturing system, basically from template through install, but it also includes all those functions preceding template, to where we sell it, where we gather the information necessary to process the job, and even after install, it's making sure the quality is right and getting paid on a timely basis. What's your purpose? So you define the system. All right, what do we want to achieve? What is our objective? What are we going to accomplish with this goal, this system that we want to define and improve? What's the boundary around it? And how we're going to measure that? How we're going to know that we've achieved success? Those are prerequisites to the steps, the 5 steps I'm about to show you. Step 1, identify the system's constraint. If you can see my hands here, I'm holding, visualize, I'm holding a chain between my hands. And if I pull that chain hard enough to break it, it's only going to break at one place, and that is at the weakest link. And we may not know where that link is. It may be in the middle, it may be on one end or the other, but we won't know unless we measure that, unless we identify the system's constraint. And there's a whole science around how to do that Chuck and I work on very carefully with an organization, but you can do it. You can go out there and measure the process steps in your business and which one of the process steps is the limiting factor. Well, that's the one you need to improve first. That's what strengthens the chain. Strengthening a link which is not the weakest link will not strengthen the chain. Only the weakest link will. Identify the system's constraint. Spend a little time doing that and it'll pay off for you. Decide how to exploit that constraint. Now these are words that were developed by Dr. Goldratt in his book called The Goal. If you haven't read that book, I encourage you to do so. You can get it from any bookstore, Amazon, anywhere else. It's available in hard copy and audio. It's available in any method you want to get it, electronic. So read the book. It's a good one. Decide how to exploit. That means get the most out of it. So the constraint is the weakest link. That's where we need to go to work. And there are a whole list of things that you can do there that will increase the capacity, the strength, the viability of that system's constraint. Step one, identifying constraints, not that tough to do. It's doing a little study and measuring the impact of performance at each process step. Exploit the constraints, kind of fun, because every ounce of improvement you get at the weakest link will strengthen the entire chain. Step three is the hard part. Step three says we are going to subordinate everything and everybody else to the above. So if Chuck is the system's constraint and I'm feeding Chuck, my job is to produce what I need to produce to feed Chuck. My job is not to produce the most I can produce, because if Chuck is the limiting factor, then it's work's going to only pile up between me and Chuck. So this is a whole different way to think, and it's much broader and deeper than this brief explanation here, but subordinating everything else, making sure that every other process step has as its goal to serve what the constraint needs when it needs it. That's very different than every process step being as productive as it can be independently. There's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right thing. And effectiveness is a lot more important than efficiency, and we can prove that. Step four, once you've done steps 1 through 3, you've gotten the most out of the system as it currently exists. And you haven't spent a lot of money yet. You haven't bought new equipment. You haven't hired new people. You've done those things that it takes to get the most out of the system as it currently exists. Step 4 is when you say, well, we need more anyway. The market demand has grown. The market demand is stronger than where we are now. There, and only there, is where you begin to spend money to hire people or buy equipment. And you don't just do that indiscriminately. You do that in a very targeted manner to make sure you're adding capacity in the place that it matters most. And then step 5 is when a constraint is broken, you return to step 1. So back to that chain between my hands, if the one in the middle was the weakest link, then we've strengthened it. We've made it stronger. We've done the things, identify, exploit, subordinate. We've made it stronger. Well, that means the constraints move somewhere else, because there will always be a weakest link. So step 5 says, well, when you've done that, when you've broken the constraint and that one that you identified in step 1 is no longer the constraint, then you go back to step 1 and you re-identify the new constraint. And don't allow inertia to become the constraint. What that means is you had developed policies and procedures and techniques and rules that applied when that first link was the constraint. Well, they don't apply anymore. It's somewhere else. So you have to go back and change those rules, policies, and procedures to make sure they apply at the new constraint. Think about this. Again, it's certainly applicable to your business, but it works throughout your personal life as well. Educate yourself. It starts with you, the owner. I mentioned The Goal by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt. You can get that book anywhere, and I strongly encourage you to read it. But here's some other ones. Leading Change by Jim Cotter. That's the book I mentioned earlier. It's all about change. It's all about what it takes to make change happen and to get results from it. It's an excellent book. the E-Myth. It was written many years ago, but it's been updated many times. E stands for entrepreneurial, and it's all about what it takes as a business owner to move from, as you may have started, where you were a worker. Perhaps when you started your business, you did it all. You did it probably every manufacturing step. You swept the floor. You did whatever it took to get the job done. You were a part of the process. Then you evolved to being a manager, where you had other people doing some things. You still did some of the stuff, maybe a lot of the stuff yourself, but you had people that you needed to manage. And the third step in the evolution of a business owner is when you become an entrepreneur. And that's where you all ought to be headed, to be an entrepreneur. That means you work on the business more than you work in the business. That's when you graduate to the point that you truly are an entrepreneur, when you work on it, not in it. And here's one that I sent to Grace today. This is a Harvard Business Review article. I think she's going to share it with you via email after this meeting.
And I was able to put a link in. So if you guys go to the chat, you'll be able to get a link to that article.
Good. This is a great article. It's called Management Time, Who's Got the Monkey? And it's a story about a guy who owned a business, and he just had every problem in the world, and people would come to him with problems, and he would take them. He would accept that, which therefore relieved the person who brought it to him, and they just walked away. They didn't have, it's not my problem anymore, they said. Well, he learned that that's not the way to do it. And he wanted to take that monkey off of his back and put it on the backs of his very good people. And he did so, and he got much, much better results. It's a great article. Harvard Business Review does lots of these. And I think last I heard, although this one may be a decade or more old, it is the most read, the most repeated article from Harvard Business Review. Good article. Please read it. You, that is you, must decide first that systematic change must happen. You have to decide that. It starts with you. So do these things. Meet with your people. Develop that guiding coalition. Now, who is that? That's the key people that work with you. Maybe some of your family members. It could be some of the folks who've been with you a long time, some people who hold important roles in your company. You want some thinkers, some people who are open-minded, some people who are willing to change, some people who are interested in continuous improvement. And you say things to that group, you say, it is a new day. We shall change the way our business operates. You, as the owner, must establish a sense of urgency. This isn't something that we can let happen over the next 5 years. We got to do it now. We need some improvement now. We need to rethink the way we do what we do so that we can achieve some phenomenal improvement quickly. And we will all benefit from that when we do so. Don't make it only about you, and certainly not about the profitability only of the company. It's about the quality of life for all who work there too. You should articulate, write it down, a vision of what your company, what you want your company to be. There are football coaches who will tell you that if you don't write it down, it's just a wish. If you write it down, it's a real goal. So write it down, put it on the wall, make sure and go over it frequently with your people. This is where we're headed. This is what we need to do. Make it important, make it a priority, and you'll get some results. Starts at the top. Change and improvement starts only with you, and only you can be the driver of change. So, does that all that makes sense so far? Grace, is there anything any questions to answer?
We don't have any questions now. I think I've been just following along. So if anyone has a question before we shift, you can feel free to pipe up, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat. It looks like Kyle, did you?
Yeah, I just had one about developing that coalition. I guess my question is what first steps do you take? You kind of have to get to a critical mass, I think, of people who are willing to undergo that change before you can really make some progress. So what are some practical steps or rewards or celebration techniques that you can get people on board for this change? I mean, obviously, as the owner, you have the final say, but you want people to be enthusiastic about that change. So I was just wondering if you had some practical, because the first step I think is the hardest. So what are some first steps that people take to make those changes?
All right, good question. I have a list of criterion that are involved with what it takes to be a member of that guiding coalition. We call it a DPI team, design, plan, implement. That's what we call it, but it's the same thing, a guiding coalition. So this is the group of people that will be responsible for developing that design for what you want to accomplish. Can't be just you. You can be the leader. You certainly should be involved, but you got to get your people on board. And the only way to do that is to elicit their activity in this. Design plan is, okay, how we're going to do it. What's our plan? What's our first step? What do we do together? It's all of us in this same boat together. It's not any one of us that must do it. And then implement. Okay, we designed it, we planned it, now let's get it done. So I'll send it to Grace, and she can share with you the criterion for that group. It's a hand-picked group that you should select to be part of this team. And you got to make it a big deal. This is not just another little thing that we're doing on Wednesday afternoon. This is a new way of thinking. It's a new day, you should say. So the people you pick to be part of that are those people that have certain characteristics. I'll send you the definition of those. I'll send it to Grace, and she can share it with you. The selection of those people is your choice, and it's a hand-picked group. So it may be folks that are senior managers. It may also be a rising star. It may be some young person who's showing some spark that you think would be a person you want to develop as a senior manager someday. So there's no magic about exactly who it ought to be. It certainly should not just be your senior management group. It should be a cross-functional group representing your entire company. That's the first step, selecting who they are, then meeting with them, saying, here's why we're meeting, here's what's going on. I would suggest reading those books first, Leading Change and the E-Myth and the Harvard Business Review article. They will help you put together your thoughts on what how you would work with those folks. And then it's a matter of making decisions on that spot on the horizon, what you want to achieve, articulating that, make it something that all that group of people are in agreement on, develop some enthusiasm among that group. That's your job as the owner to do so. And then share it with the rest of the troops so that everybody understands where you're headed. None of this is easy. None of this is easy. It's hard work. If it was easy, everybody would do it. It would be a snap of the fingers. It's not easy. It's hard. But there are some principles to follow, and those the goal I mentioned, and those three books there, the two books and the Harvard Business Review article will help you define those things you need to do. That answer your question?
Yes. Yep.
All right, good. Okay, a little bit about synchronous flow and how action flow helps us to support this. This is a science. Synchronous flow is a management science. During my years at Clemson, I was working with Dr. Goldratt for many years. I also worked with DuPont. DuPont is what got me, they are the group that got me into this industry. And they said to me, look, we produce this product called Corian, and we could sell a lot more of it if our fabricators were more productive. So I had been doing this work with Dr. Goldratt, and DuPont said, we'd like you to apply that science to some of our fabricators. We did so, had a good bit of success, and Synchronous Flow has, over the last 20 plus years, has developed into the science that I want to show you just a little bit about here. So I won't be going into great detail. I want to tell you, Chuck and I are still learning this stuff. There's quite a bit of science behind all this. It's a process engineering approach to business management. It's a concept that allows you to be more proactive and less reactive. Our clients tell us that may be one of the greatest values of the system, is that it allows us to think ahead, to catch stuff flowing through the process early in the process before it becomes a crisis at the end of the process. No one likes it when the day before an installation is scheduled, we find something wrong or incomplete, and now we got to jump through hoops and work a bunch of overtime. No one wants to do that. So we need a system in place to help us avoid that circumstance. Proactive and less reactive. We use a metric called throughput. I'm going to explain that a little bit more in a moment. Throughput is a dollar metric rather than a dimensional metric like square feet. And we use it to plan, to schedule, and to track daily performance to goals. We are big into setting goals. We set goals at the beginning of a month, and we plan to achieve those goals. We develop a daily schedule that is designed to meet those goals, and then we track it every day to tell us the status to those goals on every single day. Buffer management is a methodology. I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment, but it's a concept where we divide the process flow into color-coded zones, and we manage each zone every day. So today is Wednesday. We know where a job that is to be installed next Monday, we know where it ought to be today. And we manage those zones in that manner so that we can take action on a job that's not in the zone that it's supposed to be today in order for it to meet its schedule in the coming days. In Synchronous Flow, this management science is supported very well with Action Flow software. We are thrilled that Grace and her dad Reese and her husband are so actively pursuing this coordination with this science, so that we have a software tool that will help all of you achieve what you're trying to achieve. We've been working with other software tools many times over the years, but we are thrilled with what Action Flow is doing now to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve. It's good for you too. So, synchronous approach is all functions are coordinated around a control point, which is called a drum. Imagine a drum beats on a cadence, beats very methodical and predictable. Well, that's what we want the control point to be. And by the way, the control point is install, because that's where your cash register rings. So the whole system is based upon achieving success at install. We finitely schedule. That means you don't have infinite capacity. Assuming you have infinite capacity is also called wishful thinking. You have finite capacity. And so we want to schedule to that finite capacity every day. And we use that metric called throughput. More about that in a moment. Throughput is the measure of value added. And we set that throughput amount necessary to meet the market demand and also to meet your financial goals. Then we plan, schedule, and track using that metric every day. All other functions strive to serve the control point, absorbing variability, and they use an approach called protective capacity. We can tell you all about that if you're interested. We use inventory buffers, and we strategically place them to protect the control point. A buffer is like a shock absorber. It's like your car going down a bumpy road. If you've got good shocks and springs on your car, it absorbs those bumps and makes it less impactful on you. Well, that's what buffers do in your business system. They protect you against the inevitable bumps in the road. And we proactively manage those every single day. As I mentioned, we know every day where jobs ought to be relative to the day they're to be installed in the coming days. And we manage that very actively. And then we control how much we release into the system. The gate is template and the drum is installed. There's a signal that goes from the drum back to the gate, and it says we took this much out of the system, so let's put this much in to the system. That's called drum buffer rope, and that's a fundamental concept of synchronous flow explained in that book, The Goal, by Dr. Goldratt. Throughput. Throughput is the measure of value added. It is the sales price of the job minus your actual cost for doing that job, like all the materials that you must buy, and perhaps some outsourcing if you outsource some fabrication. It's your investment to do the job. Here's an example. If you sold a job for $10,000 and you had to buy $3,500 of material, that's the slabs and the sink and the faucet and the corbels and whatever else you might have to buy. That would be 35% of the sales price. The difference between the two is $6,500, and that's throughput. And that metric over to the right, that 65%, is called the throughput ratio. And we pay careful attention to that. We look at that at quote. So we know if we quoted the job right, we've got about 65% throughput in that job, even in the estimate at quote. If it's not that number, then we challenge that, and we may not have priced it right. Once you get the job in process, you can't change the price. So we can learn that, and we follow that number all the way through the process. Out of throughput then comes all labor, all overhead, and hopefully some profit left over. That's throughput. We use throughput for two reasons instead of square feet. First of all, throughput is more reflective of the content of the job, much more than square feet. You got two jobs exactly the same size of 40 square feet. One of them has an eased edge, the other has a mitered edge. They're the same square feet, but there's a world of difference in the labor content. Square feet doesn't recognize that, throughput does. Basically, what you do is you convert raw materials to finished goods. That's what you do. You buy raw materials. You bought $3,500 worth of raw materials, and you did what you do, and you made it worth $10,000 to your customers. Therefore, you created $6,500 worth of value, and throughput is a measure of that conversion. It recognizes the impact of special features like mitered edges, OG edges, that kind of thing.
Kelly Hill.
It also reduces the effect of raw material cost variance. A Uba-Tuba job is much less a price point and probably a lot less throughput than one with an exotic stone. That's rule number one. Reason number one, we use throughput. Reason number two, it is directly relative to your financial goals. You can know in measuring throughput every day where you stand every day relative to meeting a financial goal at the end of the month. Without that, you have no clue of whether or not you made that goal, and we can actually reduce it to something called a productivity score, which gets is a single metric that you can share with your people, and it's like a score of a football game. Everybody knows what's going on every day without revealing sensitive financial information. I'm going to go through this a little quickly. 3 definitions. A constraint is anything that limits an organization's performance relative to its goal. The constraint is that weakest link of the chain. The control point is the strategically selected point that you choose to manage around, that you choose to schedule. That's in your industry, that's install, because that's where your cash register rings. A bottleneck is a temporary limitation caused by, we call it Murphy. That's when the machine breaks down, or that's when 2 or 3 key people are absent. The effect of those is intolerable, is the way you should treat them, and you respond with urgency according to the threat to the control point, looking at those buffer zones. And here's what buffer management looks like. Templates on left, day 1, install is on the right, day 6. This is a picture of a 6-day process. Template on Monday, install the following Monday. That's 6 days. This is kind of a generic one. We develop these, we customize these for every client that we work with, but this is the general approach. Template zone is where we actually do the template. Obviously, that's done real time these days. In the light green zone, we're gathering more information, doing CAD, material confirmation. This is where the project manager roles are underway. The dark green zone is things like slabsmith, pulling, staging material. That's when the project manager roles are complete. If a job gets pulled off the schedule, it goes in the standby zone, where we know where to grab it and pull it back in when it's ready to move again. In the yellow zone, we do most of the fabrication steps, cut, CNC route, fabricate. In the red zone, we polish, we do the final quality inspection, and we make it ready before the end of the day, typically around 2 p.m. mid-afternoon, and then of course we install on the next day. We manage each of those zones every day. The flow is left to right. We manage them right to left because we're looking at the most critical points first. Any callbacks from the day before is first. Next is the red zone. That would be jobs for tomorrow. Next is the yellow zone. That would be jobs for Friday in this case. And then it moves backward to the left. And we manage those buffers all day, every day. We do buffer management meetings in the morning, typically about 9 a.m. local time, but the process is managing those zones all day, every day. This is the buffer meeting. Purpose is to identify and record buffer problems and assign responsibility to fix them. 2 things: identify and record the problems, any issues that we find where a job is not in the zone it ought to be, and we assign it to somebody. You take ownership of this, you deal with it, you make sure you pull in anyone else that is needed to get this job done so that it is no longer a problem. Once a day at a designated time. These meetings never last longer than 15 minutes, probably average 8 or 10 minutes. It's really quick. It's when you watch one, and I hope that you're able to see one at some of your friends in the industry, but and we can set that up, by the way, but it's quick. It moves very rapidly because it's not a break. It's not a place to bring coffee and donuts. This is a business meeting, and we want to get it done and move on and make things happen. People come prepared, they come on time, and they are ready to report on the status of a zone for which they are responsible. And we accomplish communication and accountability. We have so many of our clients tell us, well, we just don't communicate well. And worse than that, we don't hold people accountable to do what they ought to do. Well, the buffer management process assures that that will happen. When you leave a buffer management meeting, everybody knows the priorities. We've communicated them clearly, and we've made it clear who is accountable to lead the charge on dealing with every one of those issues. And that person would bring in whomever they must to make sure that we get results. This is the essence of proactive management. All right, Grace, how are we doing on time?
Well, we're coming up on what, an hour. So if we want to have some discussion, let's see. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, do you mind kind of moving to the discussion piece now?
We are there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if anyone has any particular thoughts, I know we mentioned Roderick. We have been getting to know Synchronous Flow. Synchronous Flow has been getting to know us. Oh, there's Reese. So yeah, I didn't know if Roderick or Reese had anything they wanted to share. Roderick has worked with both our software and the Synchronous Flow system. And so yeah, Roderick or Reese or anybody else, you're welcome to pipe in and ask questions or share your thoughts.
This is Roderick. I wanted to add a few comments to what Ed has shared. Ed is obviously a very astute professional on the synchronous workflow, and my area of expertise is the implementation of some of the tools to assist with that. And I started being aware of the synchronous workflow actually 30 years ago. I used to work for Eastman Kodak, and there was a very strong movement at that time also with the large-scale fabricators of processing thousands of rolls of film per night that got picked up and then dropped off the next morning from the drugstores and the grocery stores, etc. So that was sort of my introduction to lean manufacturing, synchronous workflow, and constraints and bottlenecks, etc. Starting way back about 15 years ago when I started working with Moreware, tried many times to try and get them to conform with some of the parts and pieces that Ed has shared with you. Same thing with Stone Profit Systems. Just could never get them to buy in to a lot of the tools that are required to conduct a very astute and informative buffer meeting. And unfortunately, those that are using those tools spend hours in any given time period to try and come up with some of the information that Ed is suggesting for the buffer meetings. Synchronous action flow, on the other hand, I was pushing with Reese probably since the beginning of my involvement with action flow, and Reese was quite receptive. And then we actually implemented the beginnings of the throughput dollars, and Reese reached out to Ed and continued to build on the synchronous workflow principles and concepts. So one of the questions that I always ask my customers when I realize kind of the tools that they could be using and should be using, but they aren't, is I ask one question: who's really running your business? And the answers I'm looking for is either you as the owner, or is your customer running your business? And that's always a delicate topic, because ultimately without the customers, we don't move forward. But on the other hand, the owner of the company has to provide direction and provide guidance as to what criteria the company needs to perform under in order to be successful. So with the tools of the synchronous workflow and the direction provided by the owner as to what the throughput dollars needs to be on any given time frame, whether it's a month or a week, or they provide that information as to what their daily throughput should be, a lot of times the scheduler will just abide to what the client is looking for, rather than being mindful of what the corporation needs in order to be successful at the end of the month, at the end of the year, whatever time frame is necessary. So if you look today in your dashboard, you will find in your dashboard, you see some of the parts and pieces of the synchronous workflow is actually displayed by using what we call the red flag reports, which are going to show you areas of concern in your workflow, but also you'll see the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone. And you'll see that the action flow daily monitor dashboards will help you looking at exactly what is on each of those zones. So those already complement, if you will, what Ed has been promoting here today. My exposure to the buffer meetings, and I've been involved in many of them and participate and support them strongly, is the number one thing is to keep your team informed. Keep your team informed on the successes, keep your team informed on the failures. And that requires due diligence every day for keeping on top of what those mean to the corporation, what they mean in workflow. Again, it goes back to constraints and bottlenecks. And then also too, the other critical part is getting a good feedback on inventory management and inventory, especially now with the suppliers challenging all of us with all the new rates and fees and service charges and fuel surcharges and all that kind of good stuff. These are things that everybody should be aware of as we move forward. So that was kind of what I wanted to just add to what Ed had done, is how important what Ed is promoting is to all corporations. But ActionFlow is at the moment one of the few software tools in the industry that is truly supporting that. This month, ActionFlow introduced its new modules. And if you were to go to their website and look at their pricing pages, etc., you will see that we've now introduced the Power BI integration, as well as the advanced metrics, which really is the T-dollars that Ed is speaking about. So these are tools which have been in beta for some time now and have proven to be very successful. So worth exploring and checking in with ActionFlow, or if you're a customer of ours, check in with us and we'll go through the Power BI and advanced metrics, T-dollars, etc., and make sure that you're comfortable to understand how these tools work and what they can do for you. So thanks, Ed. Appreciate your presentation this morning, and look forward to working strongly with you in ActionFlow.
Thank you, sir.
I'll throw in a brief couple comments. Number one, thanks, great job, Ed, and thank you, Roderick, for those comments. And I'd heard, Ed, you talk on the more objective, the buffer zones and the T-dollars, and I think that is great. I especially appreciated in this presentation just the way you were able to name several different specific, more on the subjective side, the things people say and the psychological and subjective things that keep people from moving forward. That's sort of harder to get your head around. Maybe what dealing with people, that can be maybe the more difficult elements in our experience is how to help people that are resistant to change to realize the benefits of that change. So I like the whole thing, but I especially appreciated that. So thank you, and thanks, Grace, for pulling all this together. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else, that's all I want to say. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or comments.
Yeah, I would love to just piggyback on what you said, Reese, because this is a behavioral change. And when you're in a leadership position and you're driving change and trying to lead that change, it's a natural reaction for people to be concerned. What does this mean to me? There's a great short, quick read that I read many years ago that had probably one of the biggest impacts on my career. It's Blanchard's book called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's a very short read, but it is a great discussion, and it shows some examples on how to manage those examples in terms of managing change. So if you get a chance, it's a short read. It might take you 30 minutes to get through it, but it's fantastic. It gives some great advice on how to lead and manage change. And that's what we're talking about here, really.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. And I guess if anyone, it looks like Steve Nenzel and Reese are chatting. If anyone else has any thoughts or questions, you can definitely put them in the chat now. And then, of course, we'll post this recording. For those of you who work with Roderick, you know how to find him. For those who work with your specific actionable person, you know where to find Kim and Alicia. You can see Ed's information, and we'll send a follow-up and include those resources that have been mentioned. So we have, I think, three or four books and a couple articles. So we'll include that with the recording and information to help you continue to process and follow up. And I think we're all on the team of helping all of us continue to improve. So this is fun. Oh yeah, Kyle.
Steve does have a question. Any advice on steps to get started?
Steps to get started are first, you, the owner, decide that you're going to do something. Get it clear in your own mind. Again, I would say read those books, read that article. I will send that, Grace, I'll send the criteria for the DPI team to you. That's the guiding coalition. But that's the first step, Kyle, is get it straight in your own head what you want to do. Are you satisfied with the way things are? If so, then don't do anything. But if you're not satisfied with the way things are, then make a decision you're going to do something and educate yourself. Read those books. They alone will give you great insight. And add to that list The Goal by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt. And then, those are the things that it takes to get started. Then put a team together and, go out to lunch or go get off site. Take a couple of hours to strategize and get your minds together so that you're all on the same sheet of music. That's the beginning. That's how you start it, because you can't do it by yourself, but you have to start it yourself.
Any other questions out there in the gallery?
I'll just, what Ed just, in terms of getting started, those big picture that's critically important to have the leadership and the buy-in. Just a few specific things, and Steve is an Action Flow user, and I think we have several guests that are already Action Flow users. I would say this dashboard with the buffer zones is something you can get some maybe low-hanging fruit. There's some productivity there that you can start getting pretty quickly, and then the red flags report ties into that. So those are maybe two specific elements that you can work with your Action Flow representative to maybe start getting some benefits fairly quickly from some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Well, thank you again, Ed and Chuck and Roderick, and thank you all for joining. And we look forward to continuing these conversations in other venues and in our daily meetings. So thanks all.
Thank you. Good day,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Grace.